Khailing, you have a great talk about the ego and our tendency to get defensive. Why do so many people who are kind hearted, self aware, and even emotionally intelligent still get defensive so quickly? What's really happening inside of those moments?
Oh, that is a great question to kick it off. I also preface, I mean, we had talked about this before, but I'm no expert. Obviously, I know only a little bit of psychology, but like you really care about how we treat people and how to gain wisdom ourselves along the way. So, through my research, especially with the topic so close to home for me, I learned the difference between maybe ego and pride, and we use them interchangeably. And pride tends to be something we think about negatively, but I think reshifting to give pride the more positive definition, and then ego is more maybe factual and a part of you, and not necessarily, you know, something to be afraid of or to diminish your ego. So your question being, why do we still get defensive, even kind-hearted people? And through my research, it makes so much sense because I personally have a very strong value system. I don't know if if you could say you have the same. Some people have a hard time owning values inside them, in their heart and in their minds, versus what they act out, their impulses or their reactions. And that's not because they don't believe in those values. It's because there's something affecting them or something untapped that's not aligning who they are and what they're showing the world, or maybe instead who they are and what people perceive. So, I mean, it's a very complex question. I have kind of an example of, like, if you want to if you want to be considered a kind person without prejudice, and then you're hanging out with your friends and you say something super judgmental about someone, that, let's say, you don't like to fat shame, but then just off the tongue, just so quickly, you say something about someone, walking next to you, and you comment on their body or their appearance. That is your first instinct, and that's not your fault necessarily, is what I like to say, because your first reaction is a learned thing. It's like society has taught you, so many billboards and ads and friends. Your parents have taught you, like how they treat others, your peers, how they talk about others. So that's kind of like all these almost uncontrollable urges and things that come out. And then I think your second reaction is actually a better reflection of who you are, especially if you have guilt. So let's say you fat shamed someone unintentionally. And your reaction is, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. That was so stupid. It's because you're trying to turn yourself into a different version of what you've learned, is my theory. Like, your first reaction is what you were raised with or what you've learned, and your second reaction is who you're trying to become or what you expect of yourself. So then that's why my whole talk is about acknowledging that and accepting it, and then continuing on, knowing that that's okay, that that happened, because that one comment does not define you being, a judgmental person, or, a fat shamer in this example. So I like to give myself a little bit of grace, because basically what I've learned is not, and I'm sorry, what I've learned is not in line with who I'm trying to become. And that's when we get defensive, if that makes sense. Like, someone calls me out for saying, oh, can't believe you said that. And then I say, no, I actually don't believe that. And then you start to, like, justify and hide and cover up and move on quickly, because you're basically covering up the shame you feel of not connecting your values with your actions.
Hmm. Yeah, I find this fascinating because I believe, well, so I have so many different thoughts, but one of them
Yeah, yeah,
is,
please.
yeah, one of them is that I do believe that all of us, every single person judges. It's just part of of human nature. It's like we have thoughts, and usually, I think As just like you, I'm not any expert, but I do believe that comes from a place that, giving this example with let's say fat shaming, right, that maybe it goes against your values of agency and discipline. And if you see that it's sort of, it's a reflection of, well, I'm kind of judging because even though I don't know what the person has gone through, how maybe for that person food is their coping mechanism and they're going through a very hard time, or maybe that person was raised that way, I don't know their backgrounds, but immediately goes against my values of agency and discipline and having control over my life. So we immediately have a thought, as you said, but also we're the kind of people, or humans have intrusive thoughts. And I make it like an extreme case where it has happened a couple of times to me. I don't know whether that is good or bad, or something to worry about. But if I'm on the metro and I see somebody standing there, my thought is like, okay, I'm just going to push that person out of nothing, like intrusive thoughts, right? I'll
Right,
never act
exactly.
I'll never act on it, but at least I'm aware that, you know what, of course, I mean, it's just I might be the thinker of the thoughts, but not the thoughts themselves. So I can just separate myself, detach myself from the thought. As you said, maybe I have nothing against fat people, but my first reaction is to say something, but I don't identify with the thought. And that's the part when we have to just have kind of like a detach ourselves, where it's not that it's not that if somebody calls me out, it's not that I'm defending myself to be liked, but in reality is it came out, but it's not truly how I feel. It's just something that for whatever reason was in my mind. So I think people have to be able to tell uh, the difference between those thoughts that are aligned with our values versus those thoughts that just randomly pop in our head based on maybe learned behavior, or maybe something we hear in society, or maybe that's how our parents were talking about people, or who knows,
Right,
right?
exactly. Hmm.
But what fascinates me when you talk about the ego and the pride is just that people have, and I love how you broke it down in your TEDx talk, people have a misconception, or maybe they don't understand the ego very well. For them, if somebody has ego, it's like everyone has ego, but for them, it's like somebody who's very full of themselves. When in reality, ego, as you said, you describe it as a protector, right? So, in your experience, what is the ego really trying to protect? Like our feelings, our identity, maybe our sense of safety.
Okay, yeah. So I actually took this part out of my talk for time purposes. Ego at its very base form is I actually love the ego because everyone has it's a psychological term. So the ego is a balance between your id and your superego. And I'm sorry if you already know this. The id being your instincts and your desires. So sometimes, people can say human instinct, but it's not always human. It could be your own instinct based on your background and upbringing. So that's the id, your instincts and desires. Your superego is your morals and your conscience. So that's so deep inside you that it's going to take a really long time to change those, like, right, your morals. A huge life event might change your morals, or your conscience is something that people can't really tap into because it's your own. So the ego balances your, let's just say ADHD. I have ADHD. It's like your impulsiveness, you're pushing on the subway, that's your id. And then your super ego is your morals and the conscience. I would never kill somebody. So your ego is just the, like, physical and daily manifestation of how to balance those two. It's in balance. When it's in balance, you're confident and in control. And in control, being in control is such a great feeling, right? You get to determine your destiny. You can control the outcome. When your ego is off balance, you can be self-critical and reactive, meaning your ego needs support, or your id or your super ego are out of balance. And that's essentially, to address your first question, is kind of when we become reactive, is when your ego is not balanced, meaning your desires and your conscience, one of those is weighing too heavy on you. So, like, people pleasers, for example, they go so heavy on the what I have to do, what I must do, what I'm supposed to do. And then they don't get to act out their actual desires or thoughts. They don't get to express those as much. And that's when the ego can become imbalanced. And that's when you see people pleasers. I'm a recovering people pleaser, get very resentful and angry, and they can be reactive. And that's kind of, part of my father's issue too, is he tries to do good things, but because he doesn't speak for himself or do what he wants sometimes, that imbalance causes him to lash out. And, oh, I was trying to do a nice thing for you. How dare you blame me for it not going perfectly? Or when have you ever done something for me? That's not what he's trying to get out there, but the imbalance he feels, it's like a protection of himself, of trying to, cry for help almost. I did want to address quickly, sorry, some of the things you said were really great. I also want to say that the intrusive thoughts, that example is like, it almost feels so beyond our reality. Like, if you actually could push someone, or if you're driving, you could actually like steer the wheel, right? There would be such a chemical imbalance in your brain, right? Like, that's when we have real big concerns. So that doesn't feel like as big of a sacrifice to me. And like, when those intrusive thoughts come, I don't act on it. It's like, I'm no martyr. Like, I'm just not going to do it. When it comes to the judgment is normal, I really like that you said that, because that is so true. And maybe the difference being the intrusive thought, or, to extend a little bit further, me saying a comment within my friend group, or, even safer within your family, where you don't really care to be judged as much, versus saying something to the actual person walking by. And I would ask you to think of an example of like, maybe something that you're trying to be, or when was the last time you felt guilty? Because guilt is such a great indicator of us not living out who we want to be. And it's more subjective.
Huh. Last time I felt guilty. Oh, that's uh, that's a very very good question, because I've been doing a lot of reframing, especially around regret, which is close to guilt, right? And I think that I tend not to have regrets, because the way that I see life, or my philosophy, is that things couldn't have happened any other way, right? I was doing the best I could with information I had in the moment. And by having that self compassion and that kindness with myself, I'm able to develop more self trust. Because what tends to happen a lot is we say something like, let's say for you that, in your example, that you fat shame someone, and then you're probably thinking about it for the next few hours, days, weeks, or months. And it's like, man, I was so dumb, so stupid. What was wrong with me? Instead of like, hey, it happened, and it's okay, right? We will know better next time. And I think that, at least for the regret part, I feel like that is something that has helped me to trust myself more and be more present. Like, if I screw it up, that's fine. I'm not gonna die. I mean, I'll live, but I cannot hold myself accountable for things I was oblivious to yesterday or 2 days ago. I mean, I'm judging myself with the wisdom today that I didn't have back then. But guilt, I think it would be, yeah. I think the only time that I would feel guilt, if I'm consciously knowing that I'm acting not in the best way possible. Imagine that I'm having a conversation with my parents, or when I used to be married, right? And imagine we are in an argument, and hurt people, even though, to me, you can be hurt and not hurt others. But that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I stopped myself a few times where that person, whether my parents or my partner, would say something hurtful, and I immediately thought, okay, this is gonna match, their hurt. But I would stop myself, because I know that the intention is no longer to keep the argument, is to hurt the other one just as much as they hurt me. Those moments where I would go unconscious and say it anyway, I would feel guilty, because I know that it's not how I want them to feel. I was just in a very emotional state. And I think that would be the difference. But yeah, it's hard for me to feel guilty about anything, because I'm trying to act always with the best intention, and I'm trying to stop myself before overreacting. Or even if some
Yes.
even if we get defensive, right, is I kind of stop myself from saying something that I will regret. And I think that's the part. But I love that question. But also, when I love that you mentioned people pleasers, because part of me also used to be a people pleaser, and we used to shame. I mean, I don't know about you, but people tend to shame that part of themselves. Like, okay, I don't like being a people pleaser. It's just if it feels shameful because basically I'm a doormat and everyone's stepping on me, but without realizing what we miss. And what helped me actually was the fact that I realized that that was a behavior, an adaptive behavior to help me
Mm-hmm.
survive, right? Because when we grow up, we need love from our caregivers, from our parents, from people around, because we cannot make it on our own. And that means that, okay, that helped me make it this far, but but they don't have to uh, they don't have to control my life anymore. I can just take the wisdom from it, which is what is a people pleaser's wisdom: being able to read the room, being able to read other people's emotions and see what everyone needs. But I don't have to act on it. I can just still honor
Yes.
myself and have those boundaries. Like it's something that not easy, simple, but not easy.
Yes. Well, basically everything you just said, if I were to wrap it into a box, I wish we could gift every single person that clarity of you are not your feelings and your thoughts. And that separation is, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, like it's a base of a lot of religions because they figured it out. They figured it out for us so we didn't have to. Um, but the issue is I it's such a hard like it's obviously not a level of consciousness like stepping blocks because that means we are up here and then people are down here. That's not the metaphor I'm going for. It's more like unlocking new levels of understanding who you are and how you can go about your life. It's like a level of acceptance of the faults and accepting who you were when you were raised, accepting your parents. It's like it's a whole journey that honestly, unless you go through, not unless, but to me, the people I've talked to that have gone through kind of the same journey that you have gone through some pretty hard stuff in life. Divorce, death in the family, illness, like it just awakens a part of you to separate the reality of who you are and your soul versus your thoughts and your feelings and your reactiveness. And it's like if you're arguing with someone that doesn't understand that piece, it's almost like not worth arguing because they haven't figured it out how not to hurt people when they're hurt. And I'm boiling it down to something way too simple. But I'm so grateful for the journey that I've been on because, 3 years ago, I could have not stopped myself. I would just yell in a fight because that's what I've learned. I would just um, be the doormat. Like who I really was never came out. So how was I supposed to know who I was anyways? And that's kind of a cyclical, like you don't know who you are and that's scary. And so you try to mask and, you know, cover that up and then you get defensive and you like, I mean, that's a very specific thing, but anyways, just your understanding of I don't even want to feel guilty or regret because I know that it's okay to make mistakes. And I know that I want to say something just to hurt them, but that's not effective. Like that kind of click and that kind of self-control is so challenging, like you said. But this is going to sound bad. It's really, I feel so much pride when I argue with my husband, not like pride in a bad way. I'm very proud of myself for the work I've done because I know I can never lose a fight if I never fight unfairly or poorly, if that makes sense. Like we could both win, but I know that I will never lose. And that makes me feel a little superior, honestly, because he's almost there. He has that self-control. We're able to recognize when we're getting like in the red, but I do not yell. I do not, tell a lie. I don't exaggerate. I don't call past examples. Um, I don't like make him feel small. if anything, I try to I build him up in those arguments. And then in the very back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to lose in this situation. Like I might apologize for things that I've done wrong, but I can't, I don't feel like I did poorly.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And out of a few things that pop into my mind while you were talking, one of them, I think that people don't understand something, or maybe is that when you are yelling, when you are fighting, when you're so emotional, that means that you truly care. Because if you didn't, right? If you truly care about creating that connection. See, it's funny because as somebody who was in a long term relationship, married, and I've seen other people, couples, like when the fight stops, when the rage or when the anger, whatever stops, that means that the person's emotionally checking out. It's like they truly don't care because they don't have the energy. It doesn't matter. So even though it's not ideal, at least it gives you personally a sign that, oh, I still care. I still want to connect, but I feel maybe scared, maybe feel overwhelmed, maybe I don't feel heard. And the only way that I'm able to deal with it is in this particular way. It's not the best one, but I know that I can improve over time, which you have done the work. And I like how you mentioned that when you argue with your husband and there's a level of pride. And I know this probably most people have heard this, but it's good for a reminder. It's not you against him, it's both of you against the problem, and that's why you can never lose. Because if you detach yourself from attacking him, it's like, okay, let's just attack the problem, right? Because we're a team here, we don't have to just fight each other. Then there's no way that you're ever going to lose, because now you're not fighting another person, you're not fighting another nervous system, you're fighting whatever issue there is. And last but not least,
Exactly.
when it comes to the awareness or consciousness, I, I even though I understood your um, analogy in terms of the levels and all of that, I do feel that most people, and I might be wrong here, most people don't have that level of consciousness or even level of awareness to understand exactly what's happening inside of them. They just go a lot. I mean, most of their lives they live unconscious. Their unconscious mind is just guiding their behavior, and it's such a powerless way to live. It turns like you feel that you are at the mercy of your emotions, and just like Carl Jung said once, like until you make your unconscious conscious, you will direct your life, and you call it fate. And for me, being curious, being aware has always been kind of like ingrained in my mind. But I wonder how other people have done it, because maybe in your experience you have done things that have helped you gain more awareness, or maybe higher levels of consciousness where you can just control yourself better or more, and understand, as you said, challenging of, if somebody attacks you, let me just take a deep breath, don't overreact, and try to just find ways to make this work rather than just add more fuel to the fire. What have you done to whether increase your level of awareness or consciousness or even unlock those levels?
Mm. Man, this type of conversation is so fun and so challenging because you say so much good stuff that you want to like respond to, and then you ask a great question next. So like, um, okay, well, let's see. To answer your question, I think just the small. I don't know. I'm curious if I was going to ask you if you think that most people, if they had the choice. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you if most people, if they had the choice, would they want to be in control? Like self control to me is very important, or just having control. Like, not in a bad way, obviously, but I like to steer the ship for myself. And if I make a mistake, that's at least I can blame it on me. But if not everybody cares to be in control, that's like this is a different world. Like, I like this level of consciousness and awareness because it actually makes me feel like I'm more in control and I don't have to feel guilty or shame, which are emotions I've run away from my whole life. Like those are very, Enneagram 2, 3, like shame is a huge one. So when I respond in a way that doesn't align with my values, like the reactiveness or defensiveness, um, I think unintentionally, my couples therapist, which I love couples therapy. I think every couple should have a couples therapist for when they go through big life changes. Um, was just how to apologize and how to own your mistakes. That I feel was a whole new level unlocked for me, because apologizing and admitting that you are capable of even accidentally hurting someone or being the villain in someone's story is so powerful. Like anytime I would do something even small, I can say, "Hey, sorry, that's not the way I wanted to come out. Sorry, I didn't trust you. Sorry, I overreacted." Me admitting it over and over just made me realize, the patterns maybe, and it produced less shame. And I think again, the cyclical, like, I'm shaming myself for doing something wrong, and then I'm even more reactive for the next thing. So when I was dialing it back and releasing myself from that cycle of shame, I think it was just easier for me to see the patterns before it even happened. Oh, I keep apologizing for taking control of my team meetings. I'm not letting people speak. So then I text people afterwards in a group or personally. I say, sorry, I should have trusted you more and let you speak, let you have the floor. The next time I have the urge to interrupt someone or take control, I already have these repetitions of apologizing. I basically just made the problem a conscious thing. I think that really helped me. And I didn't even connect those dots until you asked that question. So thank you for asking. Um, yeah. Then I wanted to just say really quick about the yelling means you're caring, and the rage. And when the rage ends, it means they don't care. I really love that. And I think it's just a matter of like trying, putting yourself out there to get hurt is more important in a relationship than just dissolving and disappearing. There was something else you had said about oh, that there are people who live life in an unconscious way. Is that what you said?
Yeah, kind of that they're at the mercy of their subconscious mind or their emotions, and they have no control whatsoever. They just feel that that's who they are and that's how they live their life.
Yes. And this poses a question I ask all the time, which is ignorance actually bliss? And I can tell when I'm in a pessimistic state, I'm very jaded. I can say, yes, ignorance is bliss. I would rather be someone who doesn't know and lives blindly, like almost like a sheep mentality. The people who don't even realize, what life can be if they unlock those levels. I'm like, man, sometimes ignorance is bliss. And there are people who just want to live a comfortable life and have children and die. And to me, that's also a respectable way to live. I think the question is, if they didn't get to choose that way to live, then if they did have the choice, would they choose differently? And then the follow-up question is, do we need people like that in order for society to work? Because if it was filled with people like us, one, would we get anything done? Two, what would it be? Like, we can't all succeed to our wildest dreams, because there has to like it has to be like a bell curve, right? So one, would people choose to live ignorantly if they had the choice? And two, do we need people who are, haven't unlocked those levels of consciousness? Do we need those people in order for society to work?
I love those two questions. I'm going to put them in a box because before I need before this thought goes out of my mind, I need to, I want to
Yes.
express it when you were talking about the apologizing, right? And this is something that I was talking to a good friend of mine who this past weekend, how her behavior in the past with past relationships. Now she's doing better with her current boyfriend, but in terms of that she had troubles, like a trouble holding herself accountable. If she made a mistake, she would try to flip the script and to blame the other guy or blame her boyfriend of her at the time. And for her, she something that was something that she regretted a lot. Something that she felt that those were the parts of her that were kind of quote unquote unlovable. And one thing I was telling her, it's like, okay, if we think about human nature, I believe, and I could be wrong here, that the number one thought, the number one fear, or the number one pain or wound is, am I enough? Right? It's almost like every single human would have that. Am I enough? And we always, even people say that they want to be right. I believe that we want to be wrong. Like if my question is, am I enough or I'm not good enough? I want to be wrong about it. I don't want to be right. So imagine if I make a mistake, I say something, I didn't unload the dishwasher, or whatever, scratch the car, whatever the case may be, that will reinforce the idea that I'm not good enough for my person, I'm not good enough for my family. So right away, I have to flip the script, and I don't have, if I don't take accountability, because if I take it, that's evidence that supports that belief that I'm unlovable, that I'm not enough. However, it's funny how we can trick our ego or our subconscious minds, like taking accountability, owning to our mistakes actually makes us more lovable, because now it's something that we admire from people. But we have to consciously tell ourselves that story, so we apologize in a way that, okay, this person won't be mad at me, or this person won't think less of me if I accept my uh, if I own my mistakes. But that person might think less of me if I avoid them, if I don't take accountability. Even though the ego is trying to protect me because it's seeing this story that I'm not enough, but in reality, by accepting makes me enough. So that is on one side. And going back to your question, I've been thinking a lot about whether ignorance is a bliss or not. And because to me, sometimes I have conversation with people, and it drives me crazy because I'm trying to sort of wake them up, and I was like, yeah, I'm just wasting my time. But I do believe that it's not that it's a bliss per se, it's just that it's so hard. Because imagine this, imagine waking up and realizing that all the misery in your life so far has been technically your fault, based on your own belief, because you can dictate how you experience life. Now, it can be liberating, but also it makes you feel like, man, I cannot blame the government. I cannot blame anybody. It's just always been on me, right? Sure, there are things on the outside that influence, but overall, the way I experience life, it's always been my choice. It's always been in my power. Now, so that is one pain, but the other pain comes from now on, if I don't live the life I want, it's all on me. I cannot use anything else as a scapegoat. I cannot use my parents or the way I was raised or my boss or the economy or the government. I cannot use any of that. It's all on me. Do I really want to take that truth? Is empowering, but also terrifying. And whether is if we will work as a society, I believe perhaps that maybe not, as you said, like you have a bell curve, you have what people call the NPCs, people that have just to just be there and just exist, but at least increase some level of a consciousness so we as a society live in a better way. I do believe that all of this, especially nowadays with men against women or between left and right and religious, is just people being deeply afraid, scared, and they have to defend their identity instead of like, hey, acknowledging your pain doesn't mean that I need to diminish mine. We can all acknowledge our pains and our positions without feeling that, oh, because Kaylin feels this way, I cannot acknowledge what you're going through, because if I do that, then my pain, my fears, my self-doubts are not valid. So I don't know. That
Mm-hmm.
is just my thoughts around that idea.
Yeah, it's like if you admit to something that you did, it's a risk for someone else to take advantage of that, or if they know you have that weakness. It's like a power thing. And it's really sad. It's really sad because there's so much power in vulnerability and to accountability. Like I feel very powerful in my business because I own up to my mistakes. I'm constantly, not constantly, I'm apologizing to all my team members. Doesn't matter if they're the, lowest, newest, youngest, whoever. Because I apologize, I know when I ask them to do things or when there's conflict, I look at them and I say, do you trust me? What have I done for you not to trust me? Have you can point out my mistakes as often as you want. I would love for you to, because I'm also here to serve you as your leader. Meaning, if I'm pointing out something that I need from you, this is a fair transaction. I'm not asking you to move mountains, but I have certain expectations. And it's just a really nice, respectable relationship that I have with all of my team members because we're able to be so open and vulnerable. So, yes to defending identity. I think that is such a specific thing that we're going through today. I think actually all throughout time. I did want to push back a little bit because are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Somewhat. I've done kind of I haven't diving deep into it, but
You haven't dove into it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think you would love it. When you find out that the core of it, it's not a personality test. It is finding what your motivator is, what your driver is. And so it kind of puts you into three main buckets, and it's 1 through 9. But the three buckets are, what are you trying to avoid feeling? And so for the 2, 3, 4 bucket, I believe, which is the people pleaser, the I forget, the three is like the performer or the achiever. The 2, 3, 4 bucket, you're trying to avoid shame. And that is the am I enough question that you asked. And so I actually wrote a note card for this conversation. I wrote down human goals, trying to find like patterns that all humans have. And then when you said, am I enough being, a human desire, I actually thought, no, I think enoughness and the one that I wrote is to be seen and understood. Those are actually more in line with the 2, 3, 4 Enneagram, the people who avoid shame, because the question of am I enough, it's a very outward perspective. You want to feel enoughness in you, but you crave that affirmation from other people. Which, I'm just using my husband as an example. He has no desire to feel enough. He feels so enough that he can wake up and go to bed and have not a question in his mind does he feel like he's lacking anything.
Must be nice.
He doesn't need to be seen and understood because he sees and understands himself. But he's in a different category, which his motivator is, or what he's trying to avoid is to feel less fear. He does not like to feel fear, or you could say anxiety. So I think that grouping is the 5, 6, 7. I might be getting the groupings wrong, but regardless, he tries to live as comfortable as a life possible because he doesn't want to feel uncertainty or fear. And then the last category is, oh no, I forget the last one. It's fear, shame, and something else. But regardless, I just thought it was funny. I think you should look into the Enneagram and let me know what you think about the whole concept, because to be seen and understood, to be enough, um, to live by our values, that is a very common 2, 3 thing. And that's what I am. And I assume, oh, not assume, but like, I think through this conversation, I could see that being you. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I am curious if there are, goals. And also I just want to say that this conversation I enjoy so much, but also have to recognize how, we are in a privileged place to even be having talks on wisdom, philosophy, psychology, right? And that's because our basic needs are met. We don't have to worry about losing our job, food, shelter, safety. Because those are met, we get to explore our mind and our culture. But I do think, back to the question of, is ignorance bliss, and do we need, the quote unquote NPCs? Sometimes it's maybe the people who don't even have the luxury to get out of the NPC world because they are struggling to, pay that next bill or whatever. Um, So that's another layer too that I think shouldn't be ignored.
Huh. I'm definitely going to dive deeper into the enneagrams. I know that I've had this conversation with other people, and they have mentioned the type two or type three or whatever, five or six. So, and I've never, allocated time to really dive deeper, which now I'm probably going to do. Yeah. When it comes to your husband, I kind of feel a little bit jealous. It's just,
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes, exactly. But like you might be more flexible. Like if we're on a road trip and we were supposed to stop at this restaurant we really love, but it's closed, or maybe that's not it. Maybe we're driving and you realize we're low on gas and we're just going to make it to the gas station. You'll be like, we'll be fine. If worst comes to worst, we call AAA, we get a gas tank or whatever. He, on the other hand, will be like, no, we got to stop and we got to turn around. We got to get like, he's afflicted by other things that make life less uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Like he's not just like chilling and life is good, but he has other things that ails him, obviously.
it sounds like, and I could be completely wrong here because I don't know the guy, right? So, but it sounds like that, as you said, fear, anxiety, and all of that is we need to have a sense of control, and we don't like dealing for a lot of people, but
Mm,
maybe especially for your husband with uncertainty.
the
And
unknown.
we are exactly with the unknown. But I think that I heard from someone a couple of years ago that we're not afraid of the unknown. We are afraid of what our minds put in the unknown, right? Because the unknown is the unknown. There's a world of possibility, a whole spectrum of possibilities. But because our negativity bias and how we survive, we put worst case scenario because that's what a quote unquote help us survive. Because imagine if thousands of years ago we're trying to get out of our caves and go hunt. If we don't put worst case scenario that we can be eaten by a lion or bear or something, then we wouldn't have made it this far. We would have been extinct as a human species because of that. But our nervous system hasn't evolved to today's dangers. So anything feels extremely dangerous unconsciously, but we have the power to just reframe. It's like we're all gonna be okay, that we are safe. And it's funny how people say that we need to release control. And I was thinking about it the other day. It's like, well, can we really, I don't think we can release something that we never had, because we only have control on our thoughts and actions, and the way we perceive things. But with your husband, because I used to be like very anxious person, like fear of a lot of the unknowns, like worst case scenario is, hey, I'll trust my future self to handle future problems. I don't have to worry about now, even though that's the first instinct that I have. Because if I do it now, guess what? I'll suffer twice. I'm in pain now. Just imagine all these worst case scenarios. But also, my if it goes if it ends up being true, then next time I will just suffer again because I'm going through it. So to me, I'm trying to surrender as much as I can to just release the grip, at least of my sense of my false sense of control, and say, hey, if things are meant to happen, they will happen. If not, well, it probably won't be as bad. And pointing out what you said about the how sort of blessed we are that we have in this conversation because all our needs are met. I think that it is true, but also is why so many people are struggling. Because I was thinking, like, how come the mental health issues have sort of exponentially increased over the last few years? And I was thinking, well, if you think about it, until probably World War II, I think that our goal in life as humans was to live long enough to have our offsprings and die, right? Most people died at 30 or 40 or something. Now, as you said, we have all the meats, at least in the West. There are a lot of countries, like third world countries, who are still struggling, who even though they're struggling with life, but they're not struggling with mental health, because nowadays, at least in first world countries, we have all these opportunities to just do whatever we want. We're supposed to live not until 30 or 40, but to 80, 90, maybe even 100. And we're supposed to make something with our life. So we have so many opportunities and we have to leave a legacy. And it's so overwhelming. It's like, okay, if I'm in the best time in history, damn, I don't even know what to make the best of it. And even though you can take it as a positive, that you can talk about psychology and philosophy and wisdom and understand yourself better, but at the same time it can be a burden. A burden. It's like I don't even know what to do. I'm going to collapse because I have no direction. So those were the two thoughts I had.
It's like the simple life versus the complicated one. And if you had the choice, I do think people would choose, there'd be a range of choices. I don't think, like, as humans, we would all go for one. I love, you said something about leaving a legacy, and I wrote down leaving a legacy is a farce, because that to me screams privilege. Like, you believe in yourself so much that you think that you deserve to have an impact on the world before you die, or your values are so correct that your ideas need to be spread uh, to the people and before we die. And not that it's a bad thing, because we need all these types of people. We need people with legacies, and we need people who talk about culture and society to move us forward. Like, I think you're right. I think even if someone is struggling with food insecurity, they still have time technically to talk about these larger topics. I don't know if it's that society doesn't value those topics anymore, or doesn't give them space to, like back in the day when there were like community centers and libraries and squares, and you got to like cross paths with all different people and exchange ideas and conversations and things, like it's much easier. Now we're kind of like siloed, and even more so sometimes splitting apart. But I guess the question is for me, or I'm asking myself, is do people who, have to choose between buying food and paying the electric bill, for those people, is it that they technically could seek out these meaningful conversations that we're having now? Or is it they don't have the capacity to? Like, the stress of getting the next dollar is just so overwhelming and heavy that it's like I can't blame them for not going to look at art in a museum, even if the museum is free. Like, how can you enjoy something so fully and richly if the screaming alarm in the back of your head is feeding your three kids or keeping the lights on? Like, I tend to give groups of people, I give societies really big passes. Like, I almost like say, oh, it's not your responsibility as a society. But when it comes to the individual, I'm almost like, no, I know you can do it, or something,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think that I would agree with lack of capacity. And this is coming, I'm originally from Venezuela. I've been here for 12 years now. And people in my country, they struggle a lot, and they cannot think of anything. They just might think of either I need to feed my kids or feed my family or keep the lights on, or once the weekend comes, let's just drink and have a good time and just forget about life
Ignore our
for
problems. Yes.
exactly, which I cannot blame them because once again, if I were they, if I were them, I would probably do the same because I would be in that situation. Having said that, I do believe that even people who are privileged, people that live here or in Europe or first world countries, I think that a lot of people live on a surface level, and I don't know exactly why. I don't know if they're meant to live there. Me and whether it's a blessing or a curse, I live in depth. I just kind of the questions I ask you here, I ask people on podcasts, ask my friends, I ask myself all the time. I drive without
Mm-hmm.
music, without podcasts. I'm always like thinking about, okay, why this happens, and just trying to understand things at a deeper level, but because I'm curious, right? And this is just
Yes.
me, and I get a lot of insights because things start clicking and making sense. And sometimes now I found a group of people that I can have those conversations with outside the podcast. But for most of my life, it was hard for me to find those people, even though those people were
Mm-hmm.
privileged. People were having good jobs. And I don't know is how their brains are wired. Or maybe,
Right.
as you said at the beginning, like you have to go through something painful, something hard to finally wake up and say, well, let me question a lot of things and see how much ownership, how much agency, how much control and power I have over my life. So I don't know. That is a very interesting question and is something that I haven't been able to answer. so far.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a pretty common in groups of friends like you're describing. It's a common question. It's kind of the root of a lot of it too. Um, because struggling to find people like your friends to have these conversations, it like scratches an itch in my brain and yours as well. But is it because we've been through things? Is it because we're born like that? Is it genetic? Like we don't know the reason, but it actually it feels a little bit harder to find those people now. Um, maybe I tend to like I'm a little bit anti, corporation and capitalism is, it's not inherently bad, but what we're in today is very scary and devastating because you can see people getting sold and bought and they don't even realize that they're in this mind game NPC. Like the agency is gone and people don't even realize it. Like now that AI imagery is so much more powerful, we need to question what we're seeing and what we're consuming. And like honestly, I think that's a great example of you driving without a podcast or music. Like I do the same. But that's becoming harder and harder with the younger generations and even, people, any generation, like attention spans are shorter and we're trying to fill voids. And, like I said, sometimes I'm in this pessimistic state and sometimes I'm in this um, optimistic state. And I think having these conversations always is very uplifting for me and reminds me of, the good in individuals and seeing the bright outlook on society. Um, Before we end, I am also trying to, because I'm Chinese American, but I'm diving deeper into Taoism and Buddhism because a lot of what we're talking about, it's right there. It's things that people have discovered on their own, but I'm trying to understand the religion more and the practices because it's like the mind masters, the ancestors, the academics back in the day, whatever, they kind of are trying to lay out the framework for us so we don't have to take all this questioning and digging and existential crisis and you know it's like I don't have to subscribe to the religion, but I just want to know a lot more about it. And I think that will add a lot to these types of conversations too. Because humans, I guess, have been humans for centuries, like thousands of years ago is when Taoism um, became a thing. And if they were able to do it thousands of years ago, it's like we should gain something from it. We should not repeat, past mistakes.
I actually love that a lot because and this is something kind of weird, but every time that I have kind of like an insight or something, okay, I don't know whether this is right or not. I mean, I just having I connect dots, so I use any
Hmm.
kind of AI tool, whether Chat GPT or Grok, and then I just put like a voice to text and say, this is some ideas, this is some of the insights I got recently. Is there anything that kind of proves this point, whether in psychology or anything?
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and a lot of that brings me back to just Asian wisdoms, like, oh, so my idea is not new, crap, right? but but we but basically all this, it just says like we always had answers even within, but we just have to either find it ourselves, or as you said, why going through the pain when we can just go back and see, huh?
Read what they figured out. But I think it's the same when you try to have conversations with people who haven't unlocked, or even, if you're trying to get someone to break up with their partner or help someone through an eating disorder, like no matter what, it's like they can't until they want to do that journey. So I think that's just the time that I'm in where I could have, read about Taoism like years ago, but it's like this is my time now
Yeah.
to like I want to be led because I like ideating and theorizing and things, but today I feel tired and I want someone to lead me. So that's at least where I'm at.
Yeah, and I do agree a lot with that. That in terms of like everyone has their own timing, and nobody, it feels like nobody, sounds like nobody learns from other people's experiences. We feel like, okay, yeah, you might have experienced that, but I'm different. and then you go through the pain. Fine, I'm not different, but it's almost like our brains need to go through the experience ourselves in order for us to extract the lesson. Maybe it's part of the human experience. I don't know, but I
Right.
don't
And
know.
that's why
It's
the
just
TEDx talks are so cool because not everyone cares about those topics, or the stories that I told maybe don't relate to everybody. And but you related to it, and then we started this conversation, and it's just so powerful to just connect with people, honestly, just to keep talking and then finding those people that align.
for sure, for sure. And by the way, as I said right before we started recording, I didn't know how the conversation was going to go because I do have a structure, rarely follow. I only asked probably 2 or 3 questions out of the 15 I crafted, but it's been one of the most enjoyable conversations. And I wish I could keep you for another hour or two, but then I don't want to edit that much. but
Yeah.
yeah, but as a closing question, if someone listening recognize themselves in either one of your stories or my stories, the defensiveness or the fear or catastrophizing things, what would you say is the first small, maybe compassionate step that they can take today towards becoming less reactive and more connected?
Well, not to direct people to the TEDx talk because that's essentially feels like what I went through, the question I asked myself, and then the topic I presented on, which was allowing yourself to be who you are today. And you even said it earlier, Daniel. You don't know what you don't know, and accepting yourself today is going to make such a better you tomorrow. And the whole concept I said, which isn't, I'm not trying to get it viral or anything. It's just acknowledge, accept, and continue. And it's just looking at it face value, accepting that you said it, you owned it, and that's okay, and then continuing on. And that forgiveness cycle, I think it's an act of self-love over and over again. And the more you love yourself, honestly, the more you can love your people.
Love that. Love that. Kayleen, I have to bring you back. So I just really enjoyed chatting with you.
We
We have
have to
like
do
a
this again. It's so
yeah,
fun.
yeah, for sure. But and I'll ask in a second where can people find you or just find your restaurant, anything like that. But one thing before I jump into that, I will say I know that you're a restaurant owner. I think that you should maybe think about coaching because you're in the perfect position to help those people that are in the position that you were a few years ago because you have a lot of wisdom, a lot of insights, and you can help a lot. If that is something that you would like to pursue in the future, that would be awesome. But where can people find more about you?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I love coaching and mentoring and things, and yeah, that seems like something in my future. Um, if you look up my name, there's not a lot of Kalings out there. So you can find me on Instagram. My business name is Sumbar. It's one of the first dim sum restaurants in South Carolina. And we do a lot of things for the community, but we love collaborating with all people and ideas. And we try to be more than just a restaurant, and it's kind of a place for people. And I guess my TEDx talk is on YouTube as well if you look up Kaling. Also, my friend made a short documentary that won a James Beard Award, which is a food based award. It's like 15 minutes. It's a story about my family and their immigration story and how, we all came to open restaurants. So that's pretty meaningful to me. I've been very grateful and blessed in this life. And I hope we can chat in the future, whoever you are listening, or Daniel again and friends. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'll include those links. If you send me the link of the documentary, also add it to the show notes. I'll add the TEDx talk link because once again, it was like a very cool TEDx. And yeah, I have to bring it back. It was I had such a enjoyable time, and it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, thank you so much. You know so much already. It's crazy. You don't need to learn anything else.
Well, I don't know about that because the more you
Just,
know, the more you know that you don't
the
know.
more you
So
know, the more miserable we are.
bingo, bingo, bingo. But hey, we're here and we're trying to make it happen for sure.
Yes, exactly. I love it.